Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Harm Reduction Ohio tonight on our first policy panel here in the month of October. This is brand new to us. We're very excited to have all of our panelists and participants here tonight. Thank you for learning and growing with us. We are very excited to be offering this type of content and communication with our listeners and followers and begin these important discussions in our community. Tonight, we're going to begin with myself, the moderator. My name is Amanda Lynn Reese. I am the Outreach Director at Harm Reduction Ohio. I have been with the organization a little over a year now and am just amazed at the service we are able to do and the folks we meet and the stories we hear. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity tonight to raise the voices of some members of our community doing wonderful work and bringing important awareness to some policies, procedures, and going-ons in our community so that we can all participate moving forward. Tonight, I would like to begin our evening by introducing Sarah Palazzo. She was an intern this year with Harm Reduction Ohio. She is now our Public Health Fellow, and she wrote an important report this year for us called Kinship Care, What Ohio Children Need. It is the basis for tonight's event, actually. We published this 25-page report in September, and it can be found on our website, which is harmreductionohio.org, and I'll put a link following this introduction in the chat. Sarah is a native to Avon, Ohio, which is in Lorain County, just west of Cleveland. She is a student still at The Ohio State University, OH, and she plans to graduate this May with a degree in philosophy, and she has minors in geography and history. She is a very impressive student and person. I am very glad to know her. She probably want us to mention her incredible academic achievements, but she has been above and beyond the dean's list and is currently sitting just below a 4.0 average at OSU, and it's incredible. And so we're really proud of her and all the work she does. She's also the editor-in-chief of Ohio State's Humor magazine. At my time at Ohio State, that was a very near and dear to my heart magazine, so I just learned that about her today, and I thought that was super cool. I love women in comedy. It is not a easy road traveled, so much props to you, Sarah, for all that you do. She does stand-up comedy, sketch comedy as well, in her free time. And we were so grateful that she spent the summer looking at this profoundly serious issue of kinship care. Sarah will start a discussion this evening describing what kinship care is and what she found in her 3 months of research while with Harm Reduction Ohio. So Sarah, to you.
All right, thank you, Mandolin. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen.
1 second, Sarah, while you're doing that, I forgot to mention, if you can, folks, mute your microphones while the speakers are presenting. There will be a chance for participants to speak concluding the presentations tonight. So please, as a courtesy, mute your microphone if you're not speaking, and you may or may not keep your screen on, whatever you're most comfortable with. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
All right. All right, can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
So, thank you. So, hey everybody, thank you so much for being here. Like Amanda Lynn said, I spent the summer with Harm Reduction Ohio researching kinship care and writing a report summarizing what I found and what I recommend. I'm gonna go ahead and share some slides and give a brief overview of the main points from the report. So what is kinship care? I'm sure many of you guys know kinship care happens when a child is removed from their parents' care and placed in the full-time care of a relative or close adult. Kinship care is broken into two types, formal kinship care and informal kinship care. Formal kinship care has the involvement of the government. So a child services agency, for example, would approve of a kinship caregiver, whereas informal kinship care is a lot more common and it has no government involvement. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, about 1 to 200,000 kids could be involved in this in Ohio right now. So even though this is more common, it's a lot harder for informal kinship caregivers to receive financial assistance because they're not going through the government. So why is kinship care so important? Well, studies have shown that kids do better with people who they know and love. They're more likely to feel supported, and they're better able to maintain connections to their culture and their community of origin. So although kinship caregivers do the same job as foster parents, they receive far less financial support from the government. I'll get into some numbers in a minute. So there was a court case in 2017 called DOV Glisson, and that ruled that Ohio must pay formal kinship caregivers the same amount as foster parents. However, Ohio has been refusing to comply with that. It's important to note, though, that even if the state did comply with Glisson, informal kinship caregivers would still be left out. Yes?
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, if we could have everyone who's not presenting please mute your microphones until the end of her presentation, and there will be time for questions and answers. Thank you so much.
Okay, so people often also become kinship caregivers really suddenly. So this makes the financial aspect of kinship care more challenging than for foster parents who have time to plan for a new child. Kinship caregivers are also more likely to be Black, and this makes kinship care an issue of racial justice. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the payments that are available to kinship caregivers, both informal and formal. So first is the Ohio Works First child-only payments. These payments are available to both formal and informal kinship caregivers. And per month, this system would provide about $302 per month for one child. And then the kinship support program would provide, let's see, up to, I think 306 per month per child, limited to about 6 to 9 months, however. And then those payments cannot be combined with the Ohio Works First payments. The Kinship Permanency Incentive Program applies to caregivers who are guardians of the child in their care. This would allow them to have up to $3,000 in 6-month intervals. $3,000, I should say, broken up over 6 months. And then finally, the child tax credit that has been increased for the year 2021 and is providing about $3,000 to $3,600 per child. And that's available to anybody regardless of your status as a parent or as a kinship caregiver, formal or informal. That's available to anybody as long as you have a child in your care. Kinship caregivers can also become licensed as foster parents to receive the higher amount that foster caregivers get, but a lot of people choose not to do this for a number of reasons. Okay, so I have this table, these two tables taken from a recent report from Policy Matters Ohio, and it just shows you the difference between the amount of money that kinship caregivers get and the amount of money that is provided to licensed foster caregivers. So in Butler County, you can see that kinship caregivers receive $302 per month for one child. But if you were a foster parent, you could receive anywhere between $700 to about $4,500. And that is just very unfair. Table 2, right below, also shows that the Ohio Works First child-only payments decrease with the amount of children that you are taking care of. So the first child, you would be able to receive $302 for each month. But with the addition of each child, you would only get $206 and then $168 per month. So that's also another area where it's unfair. Okay, so before we go any further into solutions, I want to talk about some misconceptions about parents who use drugs. So parental drug use is a very common factor in children being removed from their homes. So it's important to talk about these when we're talking about kinship care. So some misconceptions might be that parents who use drugs don't love their children, or they're not able to take care of them properly, they should be forced into recovery, and that drug use alone is a reason for removal. The facts, however, are parents who use drugs still love their children. They often can take care of their children while still being a drug user. Recovery should never be forced upon anybody or used as a requirement. It's also doing more harm than good to remove a child from their parents when they're not in immediate danger. So these two maps were in the report that was published. This shows on the left the percent of children in the custody of a public children's services agency. And then on the right, it's shown the highest overdose death rates. So the information was taken pretty recently at the beginning of the year and in 2021. So there's a correlation between these two maps. It might suggest a link between harm reduction needs and keeping children and parents together. Okay, so finally, how can we address inequality in kinship care? First of all, financial support is needed. We do need to comply with the Glisson decision. However, it's not a grand solution because it leaves out informal kinship caregivers. I think it's really important to increase the Ohio Works First child only payments to double what they are, at least $600 per month per child, because this is pretty much the only thing that's available to informal kinship caregivers. This should also not decrease with the addition of more children. Each child in a kinship caregiver's care should receive $600 per month. One other thing is the opioid settlement. This is a pretty recent development, but Ohio and other states are considering a $26 billion settlement with Johnson & Johnson and some other major opioid distributors. And if accepted, a portion of that money could be used to fund kinship care. And we need to make sure that those funds are going to the right place. So in terms of social and logistical support, mental health resources are really important for children, parents, and kinship caregivers, and everybody. Those should be more widely accessible, and there should be less stigma surrounding that. Additionally, foster care trainings need to be more accessible and more able to meet the needs of kinship caregivers. Finally, it's important for social workers to be harm reductionists. So the bottom line here is that kinship caregivers need help, especially ones who don't go through government systems. This is all I have for now, but I'm excited to learn from all of you guys tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really insightful. I think that was a wonderful introduction to what kinship care is, how it operates within our government structure here in Ohio, and the different types of removal and policies that are taking place and contributing to how kinship care operates here as it is now. Thank you so much for your research and your time in giving us that introduction this evening. I want to introduce now our next panelist for the evening, Brenda Cameron Ryan. She lives in Akron, Ohio, and she is one of Ohio's leading advocates for helping families, especially families that care for children whose parents have struggled with drug use or have died from their drug use. Brenda knows the challenges of kinship care intimately and personally. Her beautiful daughter, Sheena, died of a fentanyl overdose in 2016, and she was 31 years old. And when she died, she was a loving and caring mother to her son, Wyatt, even after her struggles with drug use. After she passed, Brenda was thrown into this system that we've just heard so much about, which sounds like it has some issues and it can be a little messy. She had to fight for custody of her grandson, who was 5 at the time. And if you think about what a battle for custody of a 5-year-old could look like, and the stress of just losing a daughter, how that could be burdensome on someone who's taking on a lot right now. She was successful, and as Dennis says, they don't call her Bulldog Brenda for nothing. We unfortunately know that not everyone has someone like Brenda in their corner. There are many families in the state of Ohio who are not successful at retaining custody of their children and the children of their loved ones. They can't keep these children out of foster care, which is an even more nuanced and intricate system. And they don't get the support that's fair or financial with the financials, as Sarah spoke about. So Ohio's child welfare system is overburdened and quite messy. Why should grandmothers have to fight to get custody of their grandchildren to keep them out of such a messy, overburdened system? It just doesn't make sense. So we're going to shine a little bit of light on that. Brenda, who works as a hairstylist, has become, again, a fierce advocate for kinship caregivers and the children that they care for. Something I say often is that children don't have a lot of rights and that they need a voice. And so a personal thank you from me, Brenda, as a caregiver of children professionally outside of my work at HRO. They need you, and I'm very grateful for you. And I know you have a day job, so thank you for doing it in spite of having to pay the bills, because it is a thankless and not supported job. So thank you for your mission. She's met with so many elected officials. She's advocating for change in Ohio system because she wants it to start at the top and make it happen. She also started a charity, so she runs a nonprofit, again, with all of her spare time. These women are incredible. Her charity is called Keys to Serenity, and I'll also place the link to that in the chat, keystoserenity.org. We'll put, again, that address there for you. Keys to Serenity provides support for children and their families in kinship care. That includes things that you might not think about: money for Christmas presents, making sure they have school supplies. She did an event, like a fishing derby, to give these families and these children something to put on the calendar and look forward to and meet one another. Harm Reduction Ohio is currently running a Facebook fundraiser for Keys to Serenity. I'll also post a link to that, so if anybody who wants to contribute that feels that on their heart may. And we will put a link to the Facebook page for you there. So, without any more introduction, Brenda, I think I'd love to hear from you, and the rest of us would too. And thank you for using your voice for all of those who can't use theirs.
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank Ohio Harm Reduction for having me and, letting me speak on behalf of, as a kinship provider. I'm just going to start with how I started Keys to Serenity. As you heard, I lost my daughter in 2016 to a fentanyl overdose. When my daughter passed away, I knew that I did not want her death to be in vain. If my daughter was going to die, I was going to use her story to help other families. So I originally started with helping families grieving families, and to connect with those grieving moms and dads, and to let them know that they were not alone. We would send them a small donation, a key necklace, and my personal phone number, just to connect and let them know that they're not alone in all this. One of the things that I did do was I was very open about how my daughter passed away. I did not want to continue the stigma of these deaths due to overdoses and the stigma attached to it. I wanted to be on the forefront of and helping these other families be open and honest about how their child died. So I was very open and honest about my daughter's death due to an overdose. And so I've connected with a lot of grieving parents, and 1:00 in the morning phone calls, because as a grieving mom or dad, you really do not think that you really connect with these other parents that have lost a child, because really they're the only ones that really understand. You feel that those are the only ones that can really relate, you can relate to. So that's what started the Keys to Serenity. But then we started thinking about, what about the kids? What about these kids that are not only grieving for the loss of their parents, but grieving for their parents that may be incarcerated, their parents that are just out in the streets and, and left with grandma, grandpa, or aunt and uncle. What about these kids? So we started to focus on these kids and having programs for them. The most important thing was to give these kids a day of love and connection, to let them know they are not alone. So we did the first program. We did 3 of these so far, 3 programs called Keys to the Heart. Just a day of love and connection for younger children, kind of like a carnival-like setting with bounce houses and animal shows and petting zoos and giving school supplies and giving, backpacks away to these children and just letting them have a day of love. The second event we did was for older kids, and it was a Keys to the Heart fishing derby. And that is to, again, provide these kids that are 8 years old and above into teen years, a connection with these other young people, and, give them a day of love. And all those young people went home with a free fishing rod to continue their love of fishing. Those 2 programs alone, every year, we help around 200 to 250 children, provide programs for those children. We did a Christmas program this past Christmas. We plan on doing that again this Christmas. And that was provided for kinship providers here in Summit County, and help them defray the cost of Christmas. And we were able to help 15 families. This year, we are going to do more. We have earmarked around $8,000 to help these kinship provider families for Christmas this year. And we are going to expand our whole entire program for these kids. Another thing that we do is called Keys to Parenting Again. And it is a support group for kinship providers. And we do this quarterly. Of course, the pandemic stopped us for a while because we were doing these programs in Akron at the Red Cross building. We will be able to start up again in January. And the Keys to Parenting Again was a support group for kinship providers. There was nothing out here. CSB actually came to me, which is Children's Service Board here in Summit County, and said, would you start a program? And so I did. I started a program called Keys to Parenting Again, and we just bring in professionals, judges, and some CSB workers, and just give these kinship providers the support that they need and help them with the proper documentations that they need, the proper paperwork to get their kids, the medical, get them to doctor's appointments and get them into school, and also to give them support. As an older parent, struggling raising a child, my grandson will be 71 years old. And it's tough. It's tough out there. It takes a toll on your marriage. It takes a toll on your physical health. I just have, my prayer is, and I'm sure a lot of other kinship providers deal with this, is to be able to live long enough to get my grandson raised, and be healthy enough to raise him. I share some custody. I share custody with a paternal grandfather, and he is 71 years old. Wyatt is not yet 11 until next month. I mean, do the math. It just doesn't work out. So we need a lot of support for these kinship providers. And that's why I started lobbying at the State House and started lobbying to get these kinship providers the money that they need and the support that they need. When I got custody of Wyatt, there was nothing out there. I had to just figure it out on my own. No one's going to come to your door and tell you what money is out there. If you don't figure it out yourself, then you don't know. So I've been lobbying and going to the State House, and I'm going to hold our state reps and our senators responsible to get this money that is owed to these kinship providers, and give these kinship providers the support financially that they need. And so I promise that I'm going to continue to do that and continue to work on that. And thank you. Thank you for.
Thank you, Brenda. Again, giving a voice to the voiceless and folks who just don't have rights and cannot advocate on behalf of themselves is a thankless job. And I got a little misty-eyed, not to be, dramatic, but I have had my own personal experiences with kinship care and parents who suffer from substance use disorder. And I'm just so grateful for the families out there who are doing the good work and making those connections. 250 kids had a better year because of you, and so did their families, and you provided healing and safety to them, and thank you so much. Yeah, of course. So thank you for speaking tonight. Our next panelist is Miss Dawn Pullin. She is, if we want to talk about a phenomenal person in the effort, she is the Director of Behavioral Health and Addiction at Northeast Ohio, Black Health Coalition in Cleveland. She is the person who made Harm Reduction Ohio aware of the severity of the problems in the kinship care system as policy goes as a whole. She is why Sarah had this internship opportunity to do this research and create this 25-page article that we have published on our website. Again, if you folks have a chance to read it, it is mind-blowing stuff. It's going to get you fired up and you're going to learn something. Dawn wears a lot of hats. She's super successful and the mental health and substance use expert. She is a program developer. She does radio hosts and so much more that I couldn't mention here tonight. She has degrees in nursing, education, counseling, and I believe biblical studies. So she knows all kinds of wonderful information and histories. She runs a restoration community service in behavioral health and substance use treatment center in Canton, Ohio. And, for tonight, what's really incredibly interesting is that she has seen kinship care in a way that is so intimate and so raw. I'm going to use the word raw because she's seen it from every perspective. Each of us here who has a loved one or has been a kinship care provider, has been a kid in a kinship care environment, has played one role, and Miss Dawn has been through kinship care herself, has advocated for children and in kinship care, has helped craft how kinship care is run, and now she is a kinship care provider herself. She's a social worker, so I think she spent 7 years working in Virginia and Ohio, correct? And today she is giving us her time, her academic excellence, her professional expertise, which is matched and exceeded, by her lived experiences. And it's just so wonderful to have you here tonight. Thank you so much for your knowledge and your wisdom. And we can't wait to hear everything you have to share with us tonight.
Well, you know what? You did an amazing job. Thank you so much. I want to first thank Harm Reduction Ohio for even listening to my concerns about kinship. Being a part of the harm reduction is something new for me, and I am grateful for what they do and how they're impacting our community and letting us all have a voice. And so one of the things I say about myself, I don't really talk about myself in those ways, so thank you. But one of the things I say is that I have a program that I do called the Silent Partners of Addiction. And those silent partners are our children or children of addictive parents. And so what I learned in my childhood was that I was a part of a problem, but was never asked what I wanted to know or asked me for a solution. It was everybody made all the decisions for me, but no one ever asked me. So I'm a silent partner of something I have no control over, and I'm still don't have a voice. And so my mother was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And I found out when I was in like the 9th grade, when we came home and our clothes and things were sitting on the curb, and everybody in the neighborhood knew we were evicted. So I found out, and from that point, it kind of spiraled out of control. And I ended up living with my grandmother, who really didn't want to raise any more children. And so it was very difficult because I had to go to school. And before I even went to live with my grandmother, my mom had another child who's my sister. And we all lived in the house with my auntie and her 3 kids, and me and my sister. And our parents, my auntie and my mom were both on drugs and alcohol. So what I can say is that every day was not horrific. Every day was not, oh my God, woe is me, our life is so horrible. What I can say is that we had challenging days, and we had days when things were good, and we had days when things were not so good. On the days when things were not so good, I learned some skills to make those things better for my younger, because I was the oldest, of course. And so I was in charge of taking care of my younger sibling and my cousin. And so I did the best I could. Was it hard? Yes. But the harder part was when we were all separated and put in different places, and we didn't get to see each other anymore, and we didn't get to support each other anymore. And we all were trying to figure out this new world that we had no control over. Because everybody else told us our life was horrible. But I'm not going to say it was the greatest. It could have been better, but it wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. We had a place to stay. We had food. The basic needs were met most of the time. But I say that to say we were separated, and I didn't really, the impact of that separation mentally and emotionally was very hard for me. And then to have people come and tell me all these negative things about my mom and how she wasn't a good mother and how she neglected me. And I'm looking at them like, what? Who are you talking about? Who is this lady that you all are describing? And it was rough, and it wasn't always great, but to hear someone else say such negative things about my parent was really devastating for me. And then for them to tell me, well, you need to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist because there's something wrong with you. Why would you love her? Because she's on drugs and she's not this and she's not that. What I want to say, if nobody else gets anything out of what I'm saying today, it doesn't matter. That is still my mother. It doesn't matter. She still loves me. She kept me. She didn't give me away. She didn't leave me on somebody's doorstep. Yes, she had an addiction and she had a problem, but it didn't mean that she didn't love me. It didn't mean that she didn't want what was best for me. Now, did her addiction get in the way of some things? Yes, but that doesn't mean she was a horrible person. And so what I want people to understand is that there's always things that families go through, even outside of addiction, with other things. And every family has their own struggle, but don't judge a book by its cover. You don't know the person whose house you're walking into, and you can't tell them that they don't love their kids because they have an addictive behaviors. What you can say is that they have an issue, and the ability to love them effectively from your standpoint, because what I've learned in this process too is that people use privilege or say because they're not doing it the way you would do it makes it not okay. But what I've learned in my life is that it doesn't have to be done my way. The goal is the end goal. I still graduated from high school. I still graduated from college. My sister graduated from high school. All my cousins graduated. And it wasn't all easy, but our parents still instilled in us positive things. And my mom wasn't always an addict. She didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to be an addict today and I'm just going to mistreat my kids. That's not what a person does. If a woman or a woman has a child, they have that child, and prayerfully they love that child and they want to do what's best by the child. And so let's not judge them. But the other part is that we do have to take care of those silent partners of addiction, which are those children. And talking negative about their parents to them is not okay. So I want to put that out there. Number one. So if you're a social worker, or if you're working with kids who are in kinship care and in social work, please be careful what you say in front of those children, what you say about their parents, because it's not okay to judge the person when all you know is what somebody wrote on a piece of paper, and you haven't asked that child how they feel about their parent and allowed them to express their thoughts and feelings about their situation. Neither did you ask them where would they like to live or who would they like to live with before you place them in foster care or you place them in somebody else's house. I've seen it happen a million times. I worked in social work for 7 years. I was a CPS worker in Stark County and in Loudoun County. And what I can say is every county does it different. We have some counties that do a great job with reunification, who work with those parents, and we have some counties that don't do so great because we have people who want to project their own personal biases on the families that they serve. And you get social work is not for the weak. It's for those who will really have a heart to serve the people. Your job as a social worker is to serve those families and give them the best outcomes possible. And if their outcomes are poor, it's not a reflection of them, it's a reflection of your work. So that's how it needs to look, in my opinion. That's me. So I can't speak for every social worker, but I can tell you this, I had the hardest cases and I had the most successful caseload. Not because I followed the book and I followed the rules, but I also made it a point to be human and to be a human being and not be so strict and not be so judgmental that I didn't give people an opportunity to be who they are and to learn who they were. And so as a social worker, I did remove kids, but I gave those parents the best opportunity before I removed those kids out of those homes, because I used to be that kid. And when the social worker showed up, I would run and hide. And I would be like, I don't want to go with this lady. And even in the 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and then I was separated from my family. And then I was sent to live with my dad in a whole nother state at 16. Some people that I don't know, because the social worker decided that my mom or my grandmother's placement wasn't good enough, even though my grandmother had been taking care of us all that time. So I say that to say kinship care is something that we need to really rethink and look at in a perspective from the child's perspective, the parent's perspective, and the family, because it's a family unit that's going to help that parent get sober. It's not going to be separating this child and separating that person that's using drugs from their family. That's not how it works. My mom was on drugs and alcohol most of my life. In the times that she was sober, it's because we had a great support system. So we need to provide an opportunity for men and women to have a support system from the people that love and care about them and love and care about their kids. And what we've learned is that kinship care does not have that support for families, especially if you are not in court order. So I was an informal caregiver, kinship care person for my cousin, and I got no money to take care of a 6-week-old baby. I couldn't get any daycare. I couldn't get any food. I couldn't get nothing. And I called the worker. I called the supervisor. They based everything on my income. This is not my child. This is somebody's child who needs an assistance right now to get herself together, and she needs someone to take care of her child temporarily. But it shouldn't be my financial burden to take care of someone else's child, especially when the state provides money to foster parents to provide the same care that I'm going to give, right? So, that was about 3 years ago. The little girl's 3 now. And, it was hard because I had to find someone to keep the child. And then if something would happen to that baby, I would be considered negligent or neglectful. And so that would open up a whole nother worm on Pandora's box. So what I've learned in this process is that if people don't stand up like harm reduction and the other young lady who was on here that's saying, this is not right. Our babies are going to continue to suffer and families are not going to be reunified. They're going to continue to be separated, and the stigma of substance abuse is going to get worse and not better. So I'm going to also say this, that African-American children are twice as likely to end up in foster care than their white counterparts. The system is not made for African-American children to be successful. I remember crying when I had to drop off African-American children to Amish families. That was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life. And I would drop them off there and it would be 4 or 5 African-American kids in an Amish home. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I'm saying that is not the best situation for an African-American child, not to have connection with people that look like them who understand them. And the one thing, if you don't know about Amish, is that they only go up until the 9th grade. And so we have African American children who are only going to have a 9th grade education, who are not being supported, who have family who love and care about them, but can't afford to take care of them, but they'll pay other people to do it, and setting those children up for failure. And so when I look at the system as a whole, we are failing our babies. We are failing our families. And so this is why this is near and dear to my heart. I am a product of a woman who used drugs and alcohol, but that's not the end of my story. That's just where I came from. It doesn't mean that it's over. But the one thing can say about my story is that I was connected to my family. Even though I was separated, I could still see them. I still saw my mom. As I got older, I understood drug addiction. And that's one of the reasons why I went to school and got a degree, so I could help other families like me and other women like my mom to be more successful. And so if we're going to help, we need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to take into consideration that what we see is not always what it is. We need to provide support for African American families and minorities on a greater level, and white families who are not rich, who still want to take care of their children, their grandchildren, and their nieces and nephews. And then I was told, well, you're the second removed cousin, so you don't qualify. So there's a lot of little pieces, that this kinship bill and kinship care needs to be revamped and revised. And I think that these conversations will bring that to the forefront. So I just want to say thank you. I hope that something I said touched your life or touched you to want to advocate for your family, advocate for those silent partners of addiction, those children who can't speak for themselves, but deserve an opportunity to be loved and cared for by people who love and care for them. And and that's important, that they learn about their culture, about their history, and where they come from. And it doesn't mean that they're going to end up like their parent. It just means that they'll learn some lessons that will help them through life. Because being with my mom taught me a lot of good things. Like, I know how to survive.
Yes, ma'am. I love that. I love that.
Some hot dogs and pork and beans I can eat.
You know the value of a dollar. You know what hard work looks like. You know what
Yes.
going without looks like. You know
Yes.
what it means to give something up so your sibling can have a good day. You
Yes.
know what it means and how to behave, and it makes you strong and also makes you vulnerable. It gives you empathy. Empathy is learned, and sometimes it's learned in harsh, traumatic ways. But I am so proud of you. I know I'm not your mama, but you're inspiring, and I'm proud that you're out here telling your story and doing the work that you're doing, because it's you are disenfranchised. You're not just a person of color or a black person. You're also a woman. You have a lot of barriers in our system that we all know about. And I'm sure the amount of work you had to do to make your voice heard was unjust. And
Still
so-
doing it. Still doing it.
Exactly. Exactly. And just thank you. Thank you for having the strength and the gumption and the fortitude and the anti-fragility that it takes to be the person you are. Thank you. Wow. I don't know if you guys are as amazed as I am about the histories and the lessons we have learned from these women tonight. I have a few questions I would like to ask our panelists, just to kind of begin the discussion. And then we're going to open the floor to our viewers to comment, to briefly in 1 to 3 minutes maybe share their own experience or ask some questions that they may have about kinship care, the lives of these three folks, about harm reduction, anything that they find relevant to this evening's discussions. So I'm going to go back to Sarah first and kind of talk, and any of the panelists are welcome to answer this question. Are there reasons that folks wouldn't want to become foster parents? You mentioned, Sarah, there's a multitude. But what stigma and barriers are kind of at the forefront of your mind that exists that stop families from becoming foster parents or doing a more formal government-involved intervention to gain kinship care?
Yeah, so the things that stuck out to me the most during my research was distrust of the government. And that stems from very legitimate experiences, especially with African Americans being taken advantage of and mistreated by the government. So that's one reason why people might choose to stay out of the child welfare system.
Kind of that supervision, big brother, people in their business attitude, like just kind of that more authoritative risk.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
also people who are kinship caregivers, if they become foster parents, they might lose out on certain benefits to kinship caregivers, such as like the community aspect of kinship care.
And so also you shared, I want to thank you for this, that that harm reduction no, excuse me, that harm comes from some premature removal of children from their parents just simply because they are drug users. And I have lived experience with this as well. Both of my parents suffered from substance use disorder. Both were high functioning users and binge users. So there'd be 2 years of time where everything was fine, and then there'd be a real rough 6 months. And it was one of those things where you didn't know how to advocate for yourself as a child because you're afraid if you tell the wrong person, you might lose your parents. And there's food on the table, you get your homework, you still have some structures in life that you want to keep that are your safety nets. So besides the premature removal just for drug use, what other kind of harm comes from forced removal?
I think from what the individuals that I interviewed who had lived experience as parents who use drugs, the main thing that came out of that was when the child is removed from their care, that is just like the most devastating thing that could happen in that person's life at that point. And even if that person is trying to still manage their parenting and themselves, once their child is removed from their care, it's like
They don't have
they might
anything
feel
left
like
to fight for.
they have nothing else. Yes.
I hear you. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we're also saying that not only do these children need advocates and do we need overall system reform, but that if the resources were given appropriately and equitably, these parents might be able to stay in the households with their children longer because they would have more chance and more support.
Yes.
So who determines the rubric for what makes a good foster parent, for the scoring system, for the steps you have to take to become a foster caregiver? Is that independent of these faith-based missions, the government placement ones? Because I see signs, driving down the road that say, become a foster parent, and they're all different organizations. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I actually might want to turn this over to another panelist. I don't know too much about this.
Okay, John, do you have any experience with that?
I do. I went through foster parenting classes, and I was one class away from finishing, and I quit. One is because it was not diversified, and the lady made some really inappropriate comments about African American people.
So there's some bias in the folks running these.
Yes. And then I had to correct her several times. It was not okay. And then the other thing is that, the trauma that is done during separation is not taken into account. I'm going to go back to the first question that you asked. That is very traumatic. And children are just thought that they can be resilient. Being resilient is not part of everyday life. Resilience should only come when it's necessary, not part of my everyday being. And so when we talk about removal, we're talking about a traumatic experience, and then you're placing me in the house with people I don't even know, strangers. So that's another traumatic experience. And then you want to talk about, I have to go see the social worker who is not always nice or doesn't always have my best interest at heart because that worker hasn't even had a conversation with me. I was in the 9th grade. Remember, I wasn't a little baby. I was a 9th grader. And when it all started. And so no one ever asked me. I had straight A's in school. I went to school every day. And no one.
Speak to your teachers? Did they speak to anyone who knew you and your situation?
Never asked.
So do you think this is as a social worker yourself, do you think this is about the overburdened caseload of our social workers, or do you think this is more just a miseducation, or just, all of it kind of together?
I think that people, when you take on a job, you either take it and you love it, or you take it and you just do your job. And so when people find themselves in social work who have no lived experience and who are not open to learning about other people, because is a whole culture. It's not just drug use, it's a culture. And so it has its own definitions, its own wording, its own language. And so you have to learn those things in this process. And I just think that sometimes people are burdened, they're tired, but the other part is that you have to have a heart for those kids and those families, and not only follow the book, but even challenge the book when necessary.
Thank you very much. So we know there's a lot of traumas associated with this situation. We know that there's a lot of things that we have to address before we can talk about solutions. So we kind of talked about how many caregivers there are in the kinship care system, because that's something that's been reported. Is there a number of informal caregivers, or an estimate?
The question is,
number-
is somebody keeping track of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone know how many people out there need resources and are giving kinship care informally?
Yeah, I've
I
seen
don't think that
numbers
there's,
that are like
yeah.
up to like 9% of kids. I'm not sure where they're getting that from though, or how, like Dawn said, how they're really measuring that.
Okay, I'm assuming something in public schools with ACEs and things like that, but wow. So we don't know. No one cares. No one is checking, is what I'm hearing. Okay.
Can I
Brenda. Yeah, absolutely. Please.
about, one of the questions that you asked about why people are reluctant, to possibly get the foster license. Well, first of all, in the DO versus Gleason, nowhere does it say that these parents, these kinship providers have to be foster parents to receive the money. So that is not, nowhere does it say that. It does not say that. So we do not need, as kinship providers, to get the foster license. Nowhere does it say that in DO versus Gleason. I know the state of Ohio shoved that in a budget bill and snuck some little bit of extra money and thinking we're going to solve this, because the state of Ohio is being sued right now, a lawsuit, because they're not complying. I don't, how far we're going to touch on that, but their thing was, we'll give them a little bit of money for 6 months, and then it ends, because they
That's
can
what
get
Sarah was speaking about over that period.
Nowhere does it say in that DO versus Gleason that we have to get our foster license. So, that is not even, to me, an option. Secondly, if you are a foster parent, I don't know how it would be with a kinship provider being a foster parent. You cannot even take the child to the doctor.
Right.
Your child needs psychiatric help or counseling. You have to go through CSB and go through through that. I'm not about to do that as a grandparent. That's my grand.
You can't,
So
like you said, even do childcare. I know that as a childcare provider professionally as well, I can't take kids who are kinship care because I don't have permission from their parents, and I can't get permission unless there's a whole rigmarole of who can babysit. They have to be like county certified and background checked, and makes a lot of barriers.
that's why,
I wanted
that's
to
why
ask you.
are not, they shouldn't even, entertain that idea. That shouldn't even be an option to be able to just get the money. We need to fight for, no. Then nowhere does it say that in DO versus Gleason. So, I know Ohio's trying to go down that rabbit hole and say, well, that way they can get licensed. No. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if
Yeah.
someone wanted to help kinship care providers, Brenda, because you've done this grassroots nonprofit in their area, because you're in Summit County, correct? Am I right in saying that? So if somebody wanted to do that in their own area, an individual, we had a question from Lisa, who also asked, what is a simple thing that the average person can do to positively impact the issue? Maybe someone doesn't want to start a nonprofit, or maybe they do, but like, what's the first step in providing support?
Help financially, because, here we are, a nonprofit, why, my question always has been, why is not the big organizations that are getting the federal money that's trickling down through the state and the county, why are they not providing these programs for children. Why is the CSB? Why does CSB come to me and ask me as a nonprofit to start a kinship care support group with no money? I have to fundraise to get every bit of money. So, it's really frustrating as a nonprofit that these, I always question, where is the big organizations? Why are they not providing these
There's no
programs?
oversight. So
Why is
anybody could spend it however they wanted.
Yeah, and that I've learned a lot about nonprofit, and I know about this much about government, and that's enough to know. Ooh, yeah, it's all about money, unfortunately. Yeah.
Brenda, you said you've done some lobbying and you mentioned this lawsuit. Is there something the average person can do? Is there a letter that we can
Yep.
send to our representatives?
Reps, right? Your senators. When I went to the state house, I took my grandson with me because I'm teaching my grandson about government. My plan is to. I'm an unpaid lobbyist, by the way, but for my grandson to be a humanitarian, not a Republican or a Democrat, but be a humanitarian politician. But when we went in and spoke with some of these state reps and senators, they had no idea about this Dio versus Gleason. So that part of our job is to go in there, and I had to bring all this documentation. They knew nothing about it. So my job is to go down and not teach these, educate these state reps and these senators about. They were blown away. They're like, "What do you mean they're not complying?" I'm like, "Exactly what I've said. 3 years, no compliance. It all has to do with money." So yes, write your statement. Look up who your state.
Thank you.
Yeah, and your senator and email. Email is really important. Blow up their phones. They hate whenever you blow up their phones. They hate it. So blow up
Is elder care or the Council on Aging or any representatives who help folks who might be elder parents? Are they providing any support to the folks who are over 65 who are providing this care for children?
Center for Aging? Is that what you're
Or
saying?
anybody who is an advocate for elders who might be in this kinship care relationship? Because I know they do participate in a lot of resources, and I wonder if that's something that's even on their radar. Maybe we could be bringing that to their attention as well, because that
Good idea. Yeah, the Center of
There
Aging.
is a kinship care for grandparents. There's a large kinship care for grandparents in the state of Ohio, an organization. Sarah, help me. I can't remember the name of it. I've connected you with them.
The grandparent kinship, the Ohio grandparent kinship. I don't know the last word, but it's
Ohio
perhaps association.
I think so. But they are working with grandparents who are taking care of their grandchildren, kinship care. So they do help and they help them find resources and different things of that nature. So they are working hard at trying to help the grandparents. But overall, if people really want to do something and say and help with this, write a letter. I'm going to put a plug in at this moment because there's a bill at the House right now, state of Ohio, called Bill 216. And I need everyone to go online, write a letter, tell your Congress, tell everybody to vote, do not vote for this bill. It makes it horrible for kinship care. OhioSenate.gov, Senator Johnson is the person who brought the bill up. And we need to make sure that this bill does not go anywhere. Our children will be in trouble. Our families will be in trouble. So if you want to help, join the fight. Put pen and paper together, send an email, help us make sure that we can take care of our babies and keep their families together. Because this would tear families apart for a long time.
Another question I have before I'm going to open it up to the panelists is...
Can I go back to something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so back, the first question you asked me about why kinship caregivers might decide not to become foster parents, I want to make sure that we note that you have to go through like a rigorous background check to become a foster parent, and if you have a drug offense, even if it was in a long time ago, then you cannot become a foster parent. That's another reason why people stay out of the system.
That makes a lot of sense. There are so many barriers to people with criminal histories, even if which things that I don't believe should be criminalized a lot of the time, but even things that they've done their time, they've paid their court costs, they've done all of their community service, they've served their time, and now it's time for them to be citizens and normal members of our community. And it is so frustrating how many barriers there are to folks who are that happened to them in the past, and this is where we are now, and we need to meet people where they are today.
Yeah, and then going off back to what Brenda said about the Gleason decision, just if anyone's interested, there's like a class action suit that's going on now to try to get them to get Ohio to comply, and that's called HC&YC versus DeWine, and it's currently working up into the Court of Appeals in the Sixth Circuit, just in case anyone is interested.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Accountability. We just need some accountability. There is no healing without accountability. It's something I say all the time. It can't be. There can't be healing without accountability. And, something Dawn said that struck home for me was she talked a little bit about our language, how we speak about these people who have used or who have been removed for whatever the reason is, whether it's just or unjust. How we speak about other people is paramount in our own. We are a reflection of that, and how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the collective as a whole. And as we dehumanize and other these people who are going through whatever it is that has created the situation that they're in, we pretend that could never happen to us, that we're not one bad paycheck away from a situation like that. We're not one bout of grief away from something like that happening. We are all human, and we're all connected. And I think it's very important in harm reduction that we talk about stigma and language and how words can hurt, but words can heal. So another thing an individual can do from where I'm sitting is ask someone how they are, ask what they can do, tell them they're doing a good job, show them some gratitude, bring awareness, and use your language, use your words to begin some healing. Because as Brenda participates in those, a day of love, a day of connection, one day of connection can last much longer than the few moments that connection is created. And this evening tonight is one of those moments of connection. And I am just, again, so grateful for everyone who's still here learning and speaking with us. And so I'm going to create an opportunity for us to connect. And if there is a panelist who would like to speak, if you could please say so in the chat or raise your hand. And if you don't want to speak, I can read your question for you, or I can introduce you and allow you to share your experience or ask your question. And if you don't know how, if you're not familiar with Zoom, the chat feature is the little text box, and you can click on that, and you can send a message to everyone or direct to me. Either way, it works, and we can address you and give you the floor. Okay, here's one. What are the risks to kinship caregivers? We kind of touched on that they're financially responsible for a child that doesn't belong to them, but are there legal consequences to the behavior of the children they have guardianship for? Is there programs that support them in this? What are the risks to being a kinship care provider, and does that affect people's ability to become providers?
This is not something. Oh, go ahead, Brenda.
Oh, no, it's just, you got to remember, a lot of times we are parenting broken children that have experienced trauma, as kinship providers. So as far as, you become, I'm Wyatt's legal, because my daughter passed away. I'm Wyatt's legal guardian until he's 18. I have permanent custody of Wyatt until he's an adult. So depending on whether, there's different levels of kinship. If you're just a kinship provider through CSB, then you still have to contact CSB to get, to make important decisions. But you could also be like a kinship provider. So I guess it depends on where you're at as a kinship provider. I'm just like a parent now. So I would have the responsibility if my grandson did not go to school, if he destroyed something, I'd be financially responsible for that, just like a parent. But again, if there's kinship providers out there that are kinship through CSB, so that, maybe I don't know where they fall with that.
I understand. Dawn spoke a little bit about her income being considered when it came to getting food stamps or vouchers or any kind of government assistance for these children, which we all know that rubric is, I think, for a family of 3 to get food stamps in the state of Ohio, you have to make less than $21,000. For Medicaid, it's less than $28,000. And, you can't even make $12 an hour and work 40 hours a week and get help. So it's not a fair system as it is. But one of the questions that was asked is, so if these children apply for college, are they going to be given their own income-driven opportunities, or are the kinship caregivers' income going to be a part of that equation?
What I can tell you is this: if that child is on that person's taxes, they're treated just like their own kid. So, it unless they are given, if you're only given temporary custody and not full custody of that child through the courts, that's different. But if you claim that child and that child lives in your home, then
Everything is as
unfortunately,
normal.
it is what it is.
Um,
And
Go
I
ahead.
know people can say, well, Dawn makes good money. She would be able to support a child. And let me say this: I have no problem with supporting that baby. I just had a problem with daycare. Daycare is like $1,200 a month.
It's
And
average 10K a year for full time minimum.
I had 48 hours to come up with the bed, would come up with everything I needed, and then to find adequate daycare in 48 hours. How was I supposed to do that? And then to add that child to your income. So when you talk about kinship care, it's not just about money, it's about making sure that child has a quality of life. Because the other piece is, if you're concerned about their well-being and you're removing them from this environment, and then they go to another environment, but they're not given an opportunity or a leg up in that environment, then are they really going to be more successful? Because
Oh, we're
that's
going to
the other
destroy
question.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are we talking about finances and then the support as a kinship caregiver, is there supports for kinship care? Maybe, maybe not, and when am I, and I know my social worker wasn't very supportive. I had to call her supervisor for her to call me back. So, those are the stressful things that as a kinship person, you have to go through when you're dealing with the system. Yeah, I had to do a background check. I had to pee in a cup. I mean,
Yep.
these are all these things that, I get it, but if I had an old CPS case from 2000, let's say 1988, I still can't be a kinship caregiver. These are just words, we really need to rethink this, because at the end of the day, the best interest of the child is what we should be looking for, not the best interest of what's easiest for us as adults. And so if that means placing that child in someone's home and providing financial assistance so that that child can have a better quality of life, that's what we need to do. Do we need to support that person? Yes, we do. Not just drop the kid off and never come back for 6 months until it's time for you to do your visit.
So we had a social worker, one of our guests this evening, ask a tough question. Do you know of any states that provide more than kinship care policy systems, or what can social workers do to make this easier on children and families? What can they do to be more supportive? The kinship care or the social workers, the social workers. What can they do to uplift the kinship care givers, particularly those who aren't working directly with child welfare?
What I'm going to say is treat them the way you would want somebody to treat you. If you were in that shoe, be to them what you would want somebody to be to you. Support them, answer their questions, return their phone calls, return the email. I mean, be present in the moment and provide the support you can. I'm not saying you got to be super social worker. What I'm saying is you have to be in the moment, provide what a person needs in that moment, answer the questions. It can be frustrating because sometimes they don't, it's traumatic for the caregiver, the kinship person. It's it's a traumatic experience across the continuum. And when we don't have, like, you can tell me something, I might not remember because I'm still trying to think about all the 10,000 things that I need to do in 48 hours to get ready for this baby that I didn't know I was having, or this child to come into my home. And I wasn't prepared like a person that's doing foster care that has a bedroom already set up. I had to do a whole lot. And so just think about the trauma in the stress and the increased stress that you're putting on that person that's being that kinship care person, and support them. Just say, hey, I'm here for you. I know I might, and advocate, advocate, advocate. You cannot you have to advocate for them.
We
They
have,
don't.
they don't. This is brand new to them, and that's something. We have about 3 more questions in the chat I want to be able to get to if we can. Do we know if we know about Ohio's system, but do we know of any states or national efforts that have done this and fixed it, that we can go, here's a model. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Someone's doing what needs to be done. Do it. Like, does that exist, and where is it? And that could help inform how we write our representatives.
Wait, I
Somebody-
tried to, do you
No,
want to say
go
something first?
No,
Okay.
go ahead.
I tried, this was something that I really tried to find for my research, and I couldn't really do it. Maybe I was just not knowing how to look, but I do know that Michigan is currently complying with the Glisson decision, so they're doing it, so it's possible. But I don't know too much about what exactly is happening. My research was really mostly focusing on the state of Ohio, so if any of the other panelists want to jump in.
John and Brenda, do you know anything? Go ahead.
Michigan has started finally complying too. It took them a while to get going on that as well, the DO versus Gleason. I have not researched other, if there's been another lawsuit. I'm sure it's going to take a lawsuit. No state is going to say, oh, by the way, let's get you guys a raise. This
No.
all has to do with money.
Yeah, of course.
Everything in politics has to do with money.
Well, this is
And,
capitalism.
So no one's going to, it's going to take a lawsuit like Dio versus Gleason. And I have not researched, I'm just worried about what's going on in Ohio,
Right.
and in the 5th district. So, or the 6th district, I can't remember, but it's so many states are involved with that, with the
Mhm.
Supreme Court. But I do not know, but I'm going to research that now that you brought that up.
Okay, and that's something we can all maybe participate in too and find out. Something, we have a personal story. It's going to be anonymous, but they wanted to share that in their childhood, their mother and father and their other caregivers were in military and drug culture, and getting some sort of offense could cause you to lose your military career. So somebody might take the rap for somebody else, and that would cause certain types of separation. Also, I believe in the state of Ohio, if someone has been removed from the home, their parent can't live in that home either. They've been removed, so that displaces that parent. They can't offer a lot of support to them because they're now supporting the child. They shared that, maybe they wouldn't have had to hustle or sell drugs or do what they knew how to do to make money and take care of a household if they had that support that we're talking about, like the Gleason issue. They'd had the support that they needed to have. Some other kinship care providers can even fall into the culture to do what they need to do to desperately keep their families together. And just wanted to share that there's a lot of temptation out there to do what you know how to do, what your skills are in, and these are learned trades. Part of the generational traumas of these situations is people who are impoverished and also marginally more Black Americans and Indigenous Americans are facing these cultures where this is the community they've created to survive, and now that it's a white problem, it's a problem. And so just wanted to share anecdotally that they know that they would have had a better childhood had these resources been given appropriately. And we're really grateful that you're here tonight, and thank you for sharing that with us and validating the things that these professionals and advocates are speaking about. The last question we have here in the chat, and then we will conclude this evening's panel, is it says you mentioned county to county policy and procedures do not necessarily correlate. Is there a statewide effort to do collaboration between the counties, the social workers who work in these counties. What can they do to communicate within systems to kind of make that more cohesive?
I said
First
that, so
of
I'll
all,
take it. What I
yeah,
can say
you
is
took
that
Ellen, you've been- yeah.
there's some models out there that are doing great work. Akron, Summit County, they do a great job at
Yeah.
reunification. They do a great job at supporting those families, and they do a great job at supporting those people who are on drugs and alcohol. And I'm not saying that because I know you can see if you want to compare counties, look at the numbers. I can't give you the numbers for my county. I would never be a social worker here because I just don't. I've seen the system work, and it doesn't all. It's broke, and it's sad. And so I would probably have a heart attack because I would, or lose my job because I would be going ham something.
The burnout is real. It's something that another panel or a guest
Yes.
member said. You know, even the ones out there trying to do the good work, the care providers and the social workers can build resentment not just with the system or the children who are acting out in these situations, but the lack of resources. They know a solution, but they can't give it, and they got a 30-person, sometimes 75-person caseload, and our social workers are just disgustingly is the word I'm going to use, underpaid for the work that they do, for the training that they have to have, the fact that they're mandated reporters, the fact that they can't even walk into Kroger and not see something and not be expected to do something about it. They can't have a day off. And social workers get a bad rap because they have to be the villains of the stories. But without social workers, without the people who say, hey, you know what, I want to be a public servant, I want to do social justice, and they go out there and they try, it's not for the government pension, you know, and so my hat's off to them, and I know, again, it's more thankless work, and even the ones who are unionized and stuff don't have the support that they need, and you can sometimes get a job at Chipotle and make a little bit more and have better benefits and not have the emotional burden that is given to social workers. So I want to conclude this evening not only with my utmost gratitude, but my words of healing that are: give yourself grace, advocate, remember that tiny humans are humans. They're not property. They are not less than. They are not other. And that, you know, middle schoolers and high schoolers can have just as big emotions developmentally as a toddler, and their hormones are very similar. And the fact that we hold them to a higher standard is a disrespect to ourselves and our communities. And that these children can be a part of the solution if we listen to them, because they know what they need. Just like when we talk about people who have substance use disorder or in chaotic drug use, when we talk about these principles of harm reduction, we talk about the person who is an expert in what you need is you. The person who's an expert in how to fix the broken system in this war on drugs are the people using drugs. The people who know how to fix the system are the ones who are stuck in it. And so thank you for sharing your voices. Thank you for sharing your success and your vulnerabilities. These moments were very intimate, and it takes a lot to do that. So Harm Reduction Ohio could not be more grateful for you this evening. And lastly, if Dennis would like to say anything in conclusion, I would let him speak. He is our president and founder, and the reason that we are able to have this evening at all. So thank you, Dennis, and if you would like to conclude by just sharing a brief bit tonight.
I'll just conclude by saying thank you to all you people who are wonderful people who I've met over the years, and thank you to Amanda Lynn for doing a wonderful job of hosting. So just thanks very much.
Thank you all this evening. We hope to see you back next Monday, same time. We will be having another panel, and we have one every Monday this month in October, and we need your input, we need your advocacy, and we would just love to connect with you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Good night, everyone.
Well,
I'll leave the chat up for a few minutes after we leave, so if anybody wants to get those links, they can. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sarah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, it was so great to see
We'll
you
have to
guys
do it again. I don't know what we're gonna do next, but we'll find something.
Yeah.
You're hearing from me, Don. This is you're in trouble.
Oh, come on,
I'm so
Amanda. We can
excited
work
to
something
connect
out.
with
We
you.
need to now. We need to find out. Now we need to go with the next thing. Like, okay, now Michigan's doing it. Now, what is Ohio going to do? We got to hold some accountability.
Well,
Oh my God.
we gotta do something. If Big Blue's doing it, we gotta get them.
You're welcome
They
back next
cannot
summer
outdo
if you
us.
want to do a national report, because that modeling is the key question. And I know you looked at what other states are doing. So we could do all the states, rank them, and Ohio is a follower state, not a leader. So if we can give them examples of specifically what we want, especially with the financial issue, what criteria are used. If not you, I know you're graduating and you're onto a career and a life, but if you're looking for another summer, you got a home in the same seat you sat this year.
Oh my God, thank you. I'll have to think about my options.
Graduate, make money, or come back.
Now your parents are off the call, so screw those student loans.
Oh my God. Like,
Thank you guys so much. This was wonderful. I'm
Thanks,
very
Amanda. You
grateful.
did a great job.
I hope
so
so.
much of the audience was thank you.
Good.
My God,
Good.
thanks
I'm
for
glad-
I'm gonna
hosting,
share it. My
Amanda Lynn.
Facebook's still not working, so I can't share it until tomorrow, probably. But
Yeah.
I'll be able to put it on the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition page and all the pages that we have, and just share it around. And hopefully, people watch. So
Miss Dom, one of the reasons I'd love to connect with you is, I need more people from the communities who need my support to be the voice for their community. I can't speak for them, and I need more connections, and I need to get more people who are living that experience to share their needs, and I would just love to do that. I don't want to speak for anybody, and I want to be a support and an ally in every way I can. So please, if you want to connect and help me make connections, I know
yes,
I have an energy.
call me.
I want to uplift you.
Call me.
I will.
Y'all know my email, my phone number. Y'all got everything. Just call me.
You'll be hearing from me.
Y'all have a good night. My family is calling like we haven't had dinner.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys. Have a good night. Thank you again. I
Bye.
appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks. You too.